Hello, anatomists. I'd like to talk about the first part of your digestive system, just the mouth through the esophagus. So these organs are part of your gastrointestinal tract or your GI tract, also called your alimentary canal. And these are the first places that your food is going to see as it ventures into your body. So your mouth is where we'll start, and it's frequently also called your oral cavity or your buccal cavity. And so it's enclosed by your cheeks, your hard palate, your soft palate, which is the roof of your mouth, and also your tongue. You have salivary glands that release saliva through ducts into your oral cavity. And normally you'll notice that your mouth feels moist and it stays clean, but you don't have excess saliva that's released. But if you bring food into your mouth, or even actually if you just start thinking about food, you will increase the secretion of your salivary glands to help begin the chemical digestion process. You have three pairs of major salivary glands, including the parotid glands, the submandibular glands located within your mandible, and sublingual glands under your tongue. Here are the locations of those salivary glands. You'll notice the parotid glands are quite large, located just anterior to your ear. Here is a sublingual gland located underneath your tongue, and you can see the ducts that lead from that sublingual gland into your mouth. And then here's your submandibular gland. And notice all of these have ducts in green in this picture that will take that saliva that is sent to your mouth. Now, all of your salivary glands produce saliva, but they actually all produce a slightly different type of saliva. Some produce a little bit more mucus, some produce different types of solutes, and so it's all just a little bit different, although they all do produce saliva. Most of your saliva is water, but the last 0.5% or so are different solutes. So this is made up of ions, dissolved gases, urea, uric acid. You've got mucus, helps to make your food a little bit more slippery as it slides down your throat. IgA, which is immunoglobulin A, which is a type of antibody. So you do have some immune function a little bit in your mouth. You got lysozymes, help to start that digestive process too. Salivary amylase, which anytime you see a word that ends in ASE, that's an enzyme. So you'll see lots of words that end in ASE while we're talking about the digestive system. So salivary amylase is produced, it's secreted from your saliva, and amylase digests amylose, which is starch. So a lot of the digestive enzymes may have weird names, but if you can kind of parse out the different sections of the names, you can figure out where they're secreted from and what they act on a lot of the time. So salivary amylase secreted by your mouth and the salivary glands and acts on carbohydrates, starch. Lingual lipase is also secreted from your salivary glands, also called, so it's called salivary lipase or lingual lipase, and this acts on lipids. However, one caveat to this one, although it is secreted in your mouth, it doesn't actually start functioning until it gets to the lower pH in your stomach. And because it's a lipase, it's going to digest lipids. But again, it's not going to start working immediately. But as you swallow your food, you'll swallow that lingual or salivary lipase too. And once it gets down to the stomach, it's activated by that low pH and it begins to start functioning. And you'll notice this is true for several different digestive enzymes. There's a certain pH that they have to be at in order for them to function. Change the pH and you take away the function of those enzymes. So salivary amylase secreted by the mouth, and that's why you'll notice if you put a cracker, like a saltine cracker, if you leave it in your mouth, over time, you'll notice that it tastes sweet. If you can stand just letting it sit in your mouth and not swallowing it, you'll notice over time it starts to taste sweet, and that's because all the starches get broken down into glucose. So that's a fun experiment that you can try at home, testing the function of your salivary amylase. And then lingual lipase will digest lipids in the stomach, although it's secreted by the mouth. Salivation is controlled by your autonomic nervous system. You may notice that if you're in a scary situation, if you have to give a big presentation, that fight or flight response kicks in. Sympathetic stimulation will decrease salivation. So that's why your mouth feels like it's really dry if you're in a potentially scary situation. Parasympathetic stimulation. Remember, your parasympathetic nervous system is nicknamed your rest and digest system. So pretty much anything involving parasympathetic stimulation will promote digestive processes. So parasympathetic stimulation will increase the secretion of your saliva. Mumps is when you have a paramyxovirus that attacks your parotid salivary glands, and so you get enlargement of the glands. This frequently is accompanied by fever, malaise, you just don't feel good. You have a lot of throat pain just because of proximity to the pharynx where that parotid gland is, and you get some swelling in the face due to that inflammation. And there is a vaccine available. If you have your MMR vaccine, then that will help prevent against mumps. The tongue is one of your accessory digestive organs. It is a skeletal muscle, and it's covered by a mucous membrane. So this is controlled by your somatic nervous system. You have full conscious control over your tongue, and it just helps to manipulate your food. Helps you to chew it, get it that food between your teeth. It shapes the mass into a bolus, which is this rounded, soft food ball. And it pushes that bolus to the back of your mouth when you swallow. And then the lingual salivary glands underneath the tongue are what secrete that salivary or lingual lipase. Your teeth are also accessory digestive organs. They help in mechanical digestion, the physical mashing up of your food. There are 3 major regions we'll look at in the next picture. One thing I do want to point out is when we look at your teeth, we often think about the enamel on the outside, which is what we can see. And enamel is fantastic, helps to protect our teeth. It's the hardest substance in your body. And it's very good at helping to mash up all of the different things we eat without being damaged for the most part, as long as you're careful about what you eat and brushing and all of that good stuff. But actually, the majority of your tooth is made of dentin, which is calcified connective tissue. And so you can see that in here. So the outside is covered in enamel. That's what we all see when we look at our teeth. But if you look at this yellowish stuff on the inside, this is dentin. So the majority of your tooth is actually made of dentin. And then each tooth is actually broken up into different regions. The part that you see sticking out of your gums, so you can see the gum line right here, your gingiva, is your crown. So the crown is the part that you see. The neck of the tooth is the part that's embedded in the gingiva right here. And you can see that each tooth actually goes much farther down. So the root of the tooth is actually encased in the bone of your jaw. And so this may be either the mandible or the maxilla. And so you have teeth that are embedded into your bone. You'll notice that the root has a root canal, so that's this opening right here. Notice there is great blood supply, there's great nerve supply, which is why sometimes dental work can hurt, especially if you have a root canal. What happens is the dentist needs to clean out that entire area and irrigate and flush out all of the bacteria and thoroughly clean this area right here, which is where that nerve supply is. And so that's why root canals and other dental work can be very painful because of that excellent nerve supply. And there's a good blood supply as well. And so there's some information about root canals. And then you seal it all up, repair any damage to the crown, and you're good to go. When we look at the different types of teeth we have 2 different kind of sets of teeth. We have our baby teeth, which are called our deciduous teeth or our milk teeth up here. And then we have our permanent or adult teeth. And you actually have more adult teeth, and each tooth is larger as an adult compared to our baby teeth. So baby teeth, you can see you've got your 4 incisors, and this is just one row on either the top or bottom, but you have the same on the other side. So here are your incisors, central incisor, lateral incisor on the side. Then you have your canines, and then you have 2 molars on each side, and then the same on the top row. As an adult, so you'll lose these teeth, and then they're replaced with these teeth. So you still have 4 incisors on the bottom, 4 incisors on the top. Here's your canine, so that's the same. And then you have premolars. So here's your first and second premolar, over here and over here. And then you have 1, 2, 3 molars on each side. And sometimes we get trouble with this third molar. This is the wisdom tooth. Not everybody will have their third molar come through, their wisdom teeth. And then also it's very common for there to be issues with that third molar where they need to be extracted, have your wisdom teeth taken out. Within the mouth, we've already talked about the mechanical digestion that takes place. So we've got mastication, which is chewing. And so this is done by your teeth primarily, but your food is also manipulated with your tongue. And so your tongue helps to move it around, and then it's ground down into smaller pieces with your teeth. And then you form that bolus at the end of it, and you push that to the back of your mouth to swallow. Chemical digestion is with the enzymes we discussed. So salivary amylase is secreted by your salivary glands. You start to digest those starches or those carbohydrates, and it will continue to function and act until it reaches your stomach, and then it is inactivated by that acidic pH. So salivary amylase only works in the mouth. It will stop working once it gets to your stomach. And again, digest carbohydrates. Lingual lipase is sort of the opposite. So lingual or salivary lipase, secreted by the lingual glands, and it acts on lipids, triglycerides, and it will not start functioning in the mouth. It doesn't work until you swallow it and it goes into your stomach. It is activated by an acidic pH. So salivary amylase works in a more neutral environment. Lingual lipase works in an acidic environment. So this is chemical digestion that occurs in the mouth. As you swallow your food, it moves into your pharynx, which is your throat. And this is a common pathway for food and air. But your pharynx, as you start moving that bolus to the back of your mouth, the first part is voluntary. You move it with your tongue, and the first contraction is voluntary. And then as you continue to swallow, the actions are involuntary. From your pharynx, food moves into your esophagus. And from here, you continue to, you're just moving food. So the esophagus is a transport tube. When you look at the epithelium on the inside of the esophagus, you'll notice stratified squamous epithelium. So lots of layers of very thin, pancake-shaped cells. And this helps to provide protection. Think about when you are eating potato chips, for example, and maybe you don't chew it quite as well as you should before you swallow it. And so you get that scratchy, pointy potato chip that is being swallowed. Some of those points could scratch against your esophagus. But because you have all those layers, if you scrape off a couple of cell layers, it's not really a big deal because you have lots of layers. Stratified squamous epithelium, great for protection. It's the same type of tissue that you have on the surface of your skin. It's great for protection. A little bit different, no keratinization, but multiple cell layers does help to provide protection the same way. The esophagus does not produce any enzymes. It also does not absorb any food. You can start absorbing food a little bit in the mouth. You can start absorbing some carbohydrates, but the esophagus is strictly a transport tube. That is it. No enzymes, no absorption, just moving food from the pharynx to the stomach. As we start moving down the digestive tract, you'll notice that there are sphincters gating the way between each organ. So you have an upper esophageal sphincter made of skeletal muscle. This helps to regulate food from the pharynx as it moves into the esophagus. And you have a little bit more substantial of a lower esophageal sphincter, also called the cardiac sphincter, which is made of smooth muscle. And this regulates movement of food from the esophagus into the stomach. And primarily, this sphincter's job is to make sure that food does not move from the stomach back up into the esophagus, because at that point, you'll have that really low pH of the secretions of the stomach, and you do not want that hydrochloric acid moving back up into your esophagus. Your stomach is protected against that really low pH of the secretions it produces, but your esophagus has a little bit because of those cell layers, the stratified squamous epithelium, but not much. It's not meant to withstand too much acidity that backtracks from your stomach into the esophagus. So the lower esophageal sphincter helps keep that closed. Here are the different layers. You have the same 4 layers as we talked about in your GI tract. Here's your mucosa. You can see the epithelium right here. Submucosa is right here. 2 layers within your muscularis, and then your adventitia or your serosa. Deglutition, this is swallowing as you move food back into the back of your throat and move down into the esophagus. As you move food back into your esophagus, your pharynx rises, and so you have your epiglottis that covers your larynx. And so food is forced into your esophagus and will not go into your larynx. And then you have peristalsis that continues to move that food down, 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 all the way into your stomach. We talked about that sphincter and how important it is for it to keep your stomach contents in your stomach and not allow it to backtrack into your esophagus. If you do have some of that backtracking occur, that's called reflux. And if it occurs consistently, then you may have what's called GERD, which is gastroesophageal. So gastro means stomach, esophageal referring to your esophagus. Gastroesophageal reflux disease. So basically a disease where you have material backtracking from your stomach into your esophagus. So if that lower esophageal sphincter doesn't close, then you have your stomach contents, including hydrochloric acid, that backs up into the esophagus, which causes heartburn. Heartburn was originally named because it felt like your heart was on fire. And the reason for this is because your esophagus passes just posterior your esophagus passes, just posterior to your heart. And so as you have those acidic contents come back up, it really can feel like your heart is on fire. And if you have this as a chronic disease, there are some treatments that you can use for this. You can be careful about how and when you eat your food, eating slowly so that you don't swallow a bunch of excess air, swallow small amounts of food at a time, eat nice and slow. And then there are some medications that you can take. And they work in different ways. So some histamine blockers will block acid production in the stomach. And then you could take some things like Tums or Maalox, which will neutralize the acid that's already there. And this is why some of them only work if you take them 30 minutes before a meal, if you're trying to inhibit acid production. And some of them don't work until you already have the acid being produced.